So there's a race happening right now. It is a race to find the vaccine for coronavirus or COVID-19. And in this video, I'm going to go over who's involved in this race, who the front runners are, and why exactly are they the front runners. And we'll take a look at some of these companies to see how they could be potential investment opportunities. Hi, I'm Jason with Level Up Investing, and in this channel I talk about personal finance, investment strategies, and financial news. And in this video, I'm going to go over the coronavirus vaccine race that's happening as we speak. So going into this topic, I'd like to start by reviewing some of the basics. And as we know, the coronavirus, COVID-19, is severely affecting a lot of us health-wise, a lot of us through our financial situation. It's a very big political issue that's happening. And so the vaccine race is a big deal and has gotten a lot of attention. So the basics are that there are well over 100 vaccines being developed right now. Multiple companies looking at trying to get some resolution to what's happening here. And all these vaccines have to go through what we call clinical trials. And these clinical trials happen in phases. So usually for a vaccine, it usually takes a whole lot of time, months to years to develop and have it safe for public use. But what's interesting about what's happening now is that these vaccines, some of them are being created at a very, very fast pace. And the US government even calls it Operation Warp Speed in order to give us an idea of how urgent this is. So let's go into what the clinical trials that happens in phases. What exactly does that mean? So when a vaccine is made, they go through these three phases of clinical trials. The first phase is when the vaccine has been developed and it has been tried on a small group, and the main purpose of that phase one is to determine the safety of this vaccine. Once it passes that small group, and that small group could be as little as just a few people, really. Once it passes that, it goes into what's called phase two. Phase two is a larger group. It tends to involve people of different ages to see how they react and how it works with different ages. Much older and much younger population, and it still looks at safety, but also starts to look at the dosing and what's the appropriate dosing. So that's the phase two part of the clinical trial. And keep in mind, all these trials have to do with actual human trials. So the preclinical trials, in case you hear that, that's usually done in the lab with animals and such. So this is all human trials. Then it goes into phase three, which a much larger scale to the tune of a lot of times maybe 30,000 people will be the sample, and the testing itself becomes a lot more complex. So you can see the three stages, and this has a lot to do with the current situation, with when we can expect vaccines and what companies are at what phases. So we'll go into that. So the next thing is to really look at specifically for the coronavirus vaccine that's being developed, the main goal, what is the goal for this vaccine as well as pretty much any other vaccine, is for our bodies to receive the vaccine so we would create antibodies to that virus, and it therefore improves and increases our immune response to that virus. In the current coronavirus vaccine testing, there are some vaccine types to consider. One is the traditional, which I just mentioned. The traditional vaccine is where you are injected with either a weaker form of the virus or an inactive form, and then your body is given a chance to create the antibodies, and then you're ready for when you get the real deal, get a real infection later on. So that's a traditional type of vaccine. What's interesting now is that a new method is called mRNA, a messenger RNA vaccine. So RNA is a type of genetic material, and I won't go too much into the molecular biology of it, But basically there's DNA, which is in your cells in the nucleus, which is your genetic code. And then that DNA gets transcribed into messenger RNA within your cells. That messenger RNA then gets translated to proteins, and the proteins are what we wind up using in our daily lives. The antibodies that we create, for example, as well as proteins in all of our body functions. So mRNA is a big part of that. So the idea here is that the coronavirus, it's been known that the coronavirus has what's called S proteins on the surface, these red spikes here. And so what an mRNA vaccine would do is it would introduce this mRNA into your cells, and then your normal cells will create that S protein. So you're creating the protein without having the actual virus or inactive virus injected. So you create the S protein, and with the S protein, these red spikes, you can imagine the red spikes are the ones that come and latch onto your normal cells, and that's what causes all the problems, like with your lungs. So you are now making the S protein using that mRNA, and then your body has a chance to create antibodies against that S protein. So that's the mRNA version of the vaccine type. And then there's also some combination of vaccines that are being made where companies are utilizing other types of viruses like common cold and adenovirus. They're taking a virus, a different type of virus, and then they're inserting in those viruses DNA that will then go into your cells and then do that process and create those S proteins. And then you create the immune response. So I guess I said I wasn't going to go too much into the molecular biology, but I guess I just did anyway. So that gives you an idea that there are multiple types of vaccines. So the real interesting part about these different types of vaccines is this mRNA vaccine. So the mRNA vaccine that's being created, that type can be created a lot quicker than the traditional type of vaccine that normally would have taken months to years to even get to the clinical stages and to the clinical phases. mRNA vaccine, for example, one of the companies that has created it has already gotten to human trials in 3 months' time, and that is lightning fast. So mRNA vaccines, quicker to make, and the idea is that they also can be produced. The vaccine can ultimately be produced a lot quicker and at larger amounts than a traditional vaccine. So that's what makes this interesting now, is that we have this new type, and this is a unproven type of vaccine, and that's important to know, that mRNA vaccines have not been shown to positively treat human beings in the general use. And so that's what's making this very interesting. So let's go into some of the key companies that are utilizing this technology, and you'll see why this is all important, and why the different trials, the different phases, as well as the different types of vaccines, why it's all important. Okay, so the first company is Pfizer, and Pfizer has a ticker symbol here of PFE, and I'm sure you've heard of Pfizer before. Some of the pharmaceuticals, the most popular, Lipitor, Zithromax, or Z-Pak, if you ever took a Z-Pak before, Viagra, everyone's heard of that. So these are just a couple of the names of a multitude of pharmaceuticals that Pfizer has created. Here are the key points with Pfizer. Pfizer is currently collaborating with a company called BioNTech. It's a German company, and they're collaborating specifically on this project to create this vaccine. So what gives it that advantage is that you're having development in both the US and Europe, ultimately with the plans for manufacturing and distribution in those areas as well. Pfizer is also working on 4 different prototypes and is looking to invest a total of $1 billion for this vaccine. The target supply they're looking at is 100 million doses in this year, and 1.2 billion doses in 2021. So again, how are they anticipating getting doses out this year, and it's already July, end of July, because like we talked about earlier, the type of vaccine they're creating an mRNA vaccine, and they are currently in phase 1 of their trials. So this is a good way to kind of compare these companies to see where they're at and what they're doing. So that's the first one, is Pfizer. The next one is another big name, Johnson & Johnson. So Johnson & Johnson with the ticker symbol of J&J. You've known them as a company that makes Tylenol. I'm sure you have that at home. Band-Aids and a whole host of other pharmaceuticals, as well as household supplies. Johnson & Johnson, you've heard of that. So what's interesting with Johnson & Johnson for this particular topic, they have at their advantage the global research and development, production, and distribution. So that's very important to consider. I mean, J&J is a giant company, and they have the means to not only create the vaccine, but also to distribute it relatively quickly because of their distribution chains. So their target is a billion doses globally. And on top of already what they have in their war chest, they also already have had $450 million of US government funding, specifically for this project. So we mentioned the different types of vaccines. So they're creating one of the combination vaccine using other type of virus and using coronavirus S protein DNA, and they are in phase 1. So they are, you can anticipate that because Pfizer is utilizing the mRNA type of vaccine as opposed to Johnson & Johnson, you can see that there would be potentially a difference there in timing of creating the vaccine. So the next one, the third one, and there's 5 of these, the third out of the 5 is Moderna. So you may have heard of Moderna, it's been in the news. And what's interesting about Moderna is their company, definitely a lot smaller than the other 2 companies. Their ticker symbol is mRNA, and that should give you a hint as to what they do. And they are very much focused on mRNA. So that's very interesting. So that should not be a surprise that they are creating an mRNA vaccine, like we talked about. And also it should not be a surprise that they were the first to release positive data. So they already had a lot of the structure, the infrastructure, the technology, mRNA building, especially with vaccine in this case. So they were first to release positive data. They have a collaboration with the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Disease. So that's something you'll see in all these companies. They've all had very strong collaboration with really strong partners. So that, to me, that's what makes them front runners. Something, though, that's good to know is that they were first to release the positive data, but also they've also been showing some adverse reactions to some of the trials, to some of the patients. And so that has had a setback for them. Nonetheless, they are in phase 2 currently, as opposed to the other 2 companies. The fourth one is AstraZeneca. You may or may not have heard AstraZeneca, but it is nonetheless a very big company. The ticker symbol AZN, and you may have heard some of the names of their pharmaceuticals: Crestor, Nexium. Those are just 2 examples, probably some of their most marketed examples. But again, a whole slew of pharmaceuticals with AstraZeneca. So what's interesting with them is that they have this collaboration with Oxford University, and that has gotten some traction in the news. Their target is for 2 billion doses, and they have over $1 billion of United States government funding to create a vaccine. So although they're one of the combinations, they're not an mRNA vaccine, but they are a combination vaccine. They are in phase 2 already, so they're a little ahead of the game compared to some of the other guys. So that is number 4. And then the 5th one is GlaxoSmithKline, GSK, and that is also their ticker symbol. They've been known to create a lot of generic antibiotics, a lot of antivirals, but also they're one of the biggest manufacturers of vaccines. So that puts them at an advantage as well. They're collaborating with Sanofi, which is also a large manufacturer of vaccines. So there's a significant benefit there to that collaboration. Their target is for 1 billion doses, but what's key there is their target is for not 2020, but 2021. So why is that? Well, they have a different type of vaccine that they're creating, and we talked about the S protein. So the vaccine is actually a combination of creation of S protein along with what we call an adjuvant pharmaceutical, which boosts the immune system. So the idea is that their vaccine will be more potent because it has its own immune booster, basically. So that's only in phase 1, and they have a little bit of a lag time in their target compared to the other guys. And finally, my approach to investing with these companies, I have these 5 front runners, and they're all strong in their own ways, and they've all collaborated, I think, with very strong partners. But when it comes to investment, I'm really looking at Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and Moderna. And the reason why I'm looking at those 3 is because I'm really thinking about not just the health implications of coronavirus, COVID-19, and the health reasons, the medical reasons for developing a vaccine sooner rather than later, but also you have to take into account the financial and the political implications, everything that's happened with this current pandemic and how it reaches far beyond the healthcare issues that are involved. So I'm looking at Pfizer and Moderna because they have decided to go with the mRNA type of vaccine, which we mentioned is a lot quicker, and Moderna is actually, even though it has a smaller war chest compared to these other 2 companies, the company that is their thing, is mRNA, and mRNA vaccine is what they're really focusing on, and they're also already in the phase 2 of the clinical trials, and so that gives them an edge when it comes to creating a vaccine that is safe and has proven to be beneficial, and coming up with something that will be developed sooner rather than later. So that's what we're waiting to look at to see what those results are, but they're definitely ahead of the game there. I also want to consider Johnson & Johnson because of the infrastructure, the production, the R&D, the production, and the distribution chain, and everything they have globally, being such a large company. So it's not just a matter of creating the vaccine sooner rather than later, but also having the means to distribute it, produce it, and distribute it. And so Johnson & Johnson, as well as Pfizer, have those advantages, even though they are currently in phase 1 and Moderna's in phase 2. The infrastructure really gives these 2 an advantage. So that's why I'm looking at these 3 companies, and I'll be looking at them more in detail when I review do my action video and go over actual shares and what I'm really doing for these. But that's what I'm doing based on this educational review of these stocks. So I hope you got a lot of value out of this video. I hope you like the content, and if you do, definitely give a like on the video, and certainly subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can get this content in the future. I try to do educational videos as well as action videos, and it's all about personal finance, financial education, and investing. So I hope to see you on the next video.